Hi everyone, welcome to session 24 of our leadership skills. Thank you all for being here. Today's topic is mental health. And Alyssa, my friend, she's going to be presenting. She's a psychologist, she's a therapist. She's been working on this topic for years and she has a lot of experience. So feel free to ask all your questions regarding mental health from her, and I'll also share her email so you can also reach out to her directly and ask your question, or you can just send me your question and I make a big email and I send it to her. I'm gonna send the recording of this session to all of you so you can share with your friends who cannot participate today so they can watch the recording, or other teachers at your school that can benefit from this. Sorry, where I am, it's a little loud and crowded. It's a big conference room. It's a lobby of a hotel. I couldn't find a more quiet place. So I hope you accept my apologies for the loudness here. But I'm so happy that you are here. And with no further ado, I let Alyssa to start the session.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much, Sarah. So hello, everyone. It's nice to see you. I know I've seen some of you before. I think some of you I haven't met yet. If it's possible for all of you, if you can turn your video on, just so I can see your faces, that'd be wonderful. Just so I can know who I'm talking to and everything. But like Sarah said, my name is Alyssa. So I work as a licensed marriage and family therapist. So I've been doing this for several years. It was when I was going to school to do this that I met Sarah and went to Nepal and everything. So I actually chose to go to the school that I did because I wanted to go to Nepal. So that was kind of the main reason I chose that school. But so what we're going to talk about today is mental health. Like Sarah mentioned, please let me know if you've got questions. You can unmute yourself at any point and just let me know if you've got any type of a question. If you have questions afterward, feel free. Sarah is welcome to share my email, or you can just email her directly and ask your questions there. So let me go ahead and pull up the presentation here. Let's see. Okay, can everybody see that? Does that look like it's working? Okay, perfect. Yeah, so like I said, today we're going to talk about mental health. So would anybody like to volunteer to read some of these bullet points? If nobody wants to, I can read them, but if anybody wants some practice reading a presentation, would anybody like to read?
Yes, I can.
Great.
I want to read.
Go ahead, Amrita.
Yes, so actually, sorry that this topic was started in previous class, but I couldn't join on that day.
Gotcha. Okay, perfect. So that's no problem. So go ahead, and whenever you're ready, you can read this slide.
Yeah, what is mental health? Mental health includes our emotional, physical, psychological, and social well-being. CDC 2023. Our mental health influences how we feel, think, and behave, including how we make choices in our lives. Mental health is a state of mental well-being that enables people to cope with the stresses of life, realizes their abilities, learn well and work well, and contribute to their community. WHO 2022. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. So yes, mental health, I think a lot of us, sometimes when we think of mental health, we think actually of mental illness. We think of when we're not doing well. But I think it's really helpful sometimes to what's called reframe that. Think of it as mental health, just like physical health. When we're healthy, doing well, mental health is a state of overall well-being when we're feeling well mentally. And like this explains, mental health includes emotional. So those are our emotions or our feelings, which would be if you're feeling sad, if you're happy, when you're angry, when you're surprised, if you feel disgusted. There's actually something like 80 something distinct emotions for all human beings. So there are lots of different emotional experiences that we can have. Psychological, that talks about the way that we think. So the thoughts that go through our heads, right? In response to something that happens, we think about it in a certain way. If we're walking down the street and we wave at someone and they don't wave back, we might think something either like, oh, maybe they didn't see me, or we might think something else like, maybe that person doesn't like me, maybe I did something wrong, right? And so the way that we think can influence how we feel. If we think maybe they didn't see me, we feel fine, we just go about our day. But if we think, oh, that person doesn't like me, we might feel sad, we might feel anxious, we might feel worried. So it can have a really big effect on our emotions and how we feel, right? And then so social well-being, that includes our social lives. So that can be where we work, that can be our school, where we go for our education, that can be our friendships or our family life, or how we engage with our culture or our religion. So all of those three things, emotional, psychological, and social, have a really big effect on the overall picture of mental health, right? And again, our mental health influences the way that we feel and think, which also affects how we act or what we do, how we behave. If we feel good about ourselves, if we feel confident and happy, we're ready to take on the world, we might be more likely to exercise or to study or to text or call friends, to reach out and keep our relationships. Otherwise, if we feel anxious or we feel sad or we're feeling very low, we might just want to stay in bed, right? And not exercise, not eat healthy, not do things that we feel like we know we should do, but we're not in the mood. So how we feel and think has a really, really big effect on how we act and what we do, which in turn goes the other way as well. What we do also affects how we feel and think. So it's kind of like a cycle. It all works together to comprise our mental health. Does anybody have any questions about this? This slide in particular? No? Okay, awesome. So let's go to the next. Okay, so these are factors that influence mental health. And I know those of you on your phone, it might be small. I don't know if anyone can see it. If they want to read, if nobody can see it, I can read it if it's too small. Is there anybody that can see this slide that wants to read it?
I want to read it, ma'am.
Okay, great. Go ahead.
Factors that influence mental health: biology, physical health, genetic vulnerabilities, drug effects; psychological, physical health, coping skills, social skills; family relationship, self-esteem, mental health; social, peers, family circumstances, family relationships. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you so much. And that was Naina, that was you? Yes, thank you so much for reading that. Yes, so another way of looking at mental health is these three factors. So again, social and psychological. We can think of psychological as being both emotional and mental, so feelings and thinking. Biological is what it describes. So our physical health, are we eating well? Are we sleeping enough? Are we drinking enough water? Are we taking care of our bodies? Genetic vulnerabilities, what that means is the family that you're born into, the genes that you have when you're born. Are you a person who was born more likely to become anxious in your life? Are you born more likely to get depression? Some of these mental health issues that we'll talk about, they can run in families. So you can look back over your family, or you can think about current family members and think, oh, that person maybe has anxiety, or that person has depression. Maybe this is something that runs in my family. Drug effects. So this can be things like using substances, drinking alcohol, taking medicines. Sometimes that can affect our bodies, which can affect our mental health. If you drink caffeine, does anybody drink coffee or tea with caffeine in it? Yeah, I mean, I'm drinking coffee right now, so I drink a lot of caffeine. So caffeine can make us feel hyper, but it can also cause anxiety. It can lead us to feeling very on edge, very jittery. So that can influence your mental health depending on what we're putting into our bodies, right? Psychological, that factor, So this can include, just like we talked about before, the thoughts that we have, the emotions we experience. This can also be coping skills, so things that we do to help us when we don't feel well mentally, when we are feeling very nervous or very stressed, what we do to take care of ourselves, if we do activities to help. Social skills, so this can be, social skills are how you talk to other people. If you're in a group with other people, different skills like you've been learning about, so communication skills and speaking assertively, all of these things can affect your mental or psychological health if you feel like you know how you can talk to other people versus if you feel like you can't. Family relationships can affect our psychological health. So the quality of our relationships in our family, do we have good relationships with our family members or do we have bad relationships with our family members? That can affect the way that we feel about ourselves and our overall mental health. Self-esteem, who can tell me what self-esteem means? How would you describe what self-esteem is? Anybody like to volunteer? That's okay. So self-esteem is the way that, or Amrita, did you unmute yourself?
Yes, the power of whatever you have inside with us, believing or something capacity, capabilities to believe on.
Yeah, exactly. So how we feel about ourselves, right? So exactly that. So like our capabilities, our capacity to do things, our confidence in ourselves. Self-esteem can talk about like how we feel about the way we look. Do you like yourself or do you not like yourself? So self-esteem is all about how you feel inside about who you are. Exactly that. Thank you so much. And then overall mental health is in that psychological category. And then so social influences over here of mental health. So that can be your peers. So these are the people around you, your friends, your colleagues, your coworkers, the people in your classes, the people around you that are of your age group, kind of who you associate with, who you call your friends and who's around you. That can affect our overall mental health. Our family circumstances. So that means family circumstances is like, how is our family doing? Is our family, do we have are we able to take care of ourselves? Can your family feed themselves? Do you have enough money and finances to eat food and to have a safe place to live? Or is that a struggle? Has your family gone through trauma? Have there been things that have happened in your family's life over time that have been very traumatic or very scary, or have there been losses and things that have happened? And again, those family relationships. So the quality of your relationships in your family. Do you have a good relationship with your family members, or do you have a bad or a poor relationship? Do you feel close, or do you feel like you're far away, like you don't get along? Okay. Is there anything that, as I'm talking about this, that stands out to anybody in terms of, do you have any questions so far about these? These factors that make up your mental health, things that influence them. Does anybody have any questions so far? It seems pretty straightforward. Okay. Okay, awesome. Okay, so again, we were talking about mental health, looking at it from like, what is healthy, right? When we're feeling good, what also can happen are common mental health issues. So when we're not feeling so good. So these are things that if you go to a professional, if you talk to a psychologist, if you talk to a therapist, they might help you identify, oh, you might have something going on. You might be depressed. You might have what's called like a diagnosis. Just like when you go to the doctor, a mental health professional can give you a diagnosis to say, oh, this is what's going on. So I'll explain kind of what these are, but who would like to read this list of some common mental health issues? Who can read it for us?
May I try?
Can I?
Let's see, we'll have, let's do Prakriti, can do this one, and then Definitely, there's more slides, so we can have whoever wants to read next after that. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Common mental health issues: depression, anxiety, trauma and stressor related disorders, adjustment disorders, parental mood and anxiety disorders, behavioral disorders. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, so who can tell me when we say depression, who knows what depression is? Can somebody tell us, what do you think depression looks like? I have a volunteer.
I think depression, there are three levels. One is normal, and next is like more than normal, and next is very risk. If people in risk level of depression, they are unconscious, uh, they don't know, like suicidal case is happen because of high depression. I think this is my views. Last time I have a workshop on suicidal prevention techniques. I got from that, ma'am. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Prakriti. Yes, so definitely depression can be, there can be those days where it's just normal, we feel just depressed, we're just having a bad day. So there's normal, kind of like, oh, I'm feeling low. Then there is maybe higher than that. We can say medium maybe, or moderate is another word. So that's maybe when you can get a diagnosis of depression, where it's lasting for weeks and weeks and weeks. So usually what it is it's like a very depressed mood, or sometimes people feel like you don't feel anything. So it's not even that you feel sad. People say it's like, I feel nothing. So sometimes that can be with depression, and this lasts for weeks and weeks. Other things, people can have a hard time sleeping, or they sleep a lot and a lot and a lot. Sometimes when it gets really severe, exactly like Prakriti you shared, that can lead to suicidal thoughts. That can lead to people wanting to end their life if it's very severe depression. So it's dangerous. It's a really big deal, and very important to get help. Very important to pay attention to it and get help if you notice that it's starting to feel that way. Other things, people, when you're depressed, you can have a hard time focusing on things, trying to do your schoolwork. You just don't care anymore. You don't take in the information. You can feel very tired, you just want to stay in bed all the time. For some people, sometimes depression can look like it's that very sad, low mood. Other times it can be that you're very irritable or irritated, that you're very agitated, or kind of not the same as grumpy, but sometimes, especially for kids, for young kids, depression can be when they're very angry. That can actually be a sign of depression in some people. So it doesn't always look like, again, like somebody's just very, very sad, crying all the time. Sometimes it can be you feel nothing. Sometimes, especially for kids, it can be that they're very angry and irritated. Okay. Can anybody think of anything else to add to depression that I didn't go over? Things that you've seen before or experienced, or any questions about depression? Okay. So we'll go to anxiety then. So who can tell me, what do you think anxiety is? What does anxiety look like?
Great fear, I think.
Fear, yeah, definitely. What do you think somebody looks like, Amrita, when they're anxious? How can you tell if someone is anxious when they have fear?
Like exam fear.
Like what's that?
Exam fear, anxiety, exam is related. Overstress, isn't it?
Yeah, like when someone is stressed out, how do they act? What do they do with their body, or how do they act? Yeah, so
They go silent, sad.
sometimes, yeah, they can be silent or
Yeah,
sad.
something that is numbness, and feeling what is about something that is which was happened in the past or something
Yeah,
like that.
yes.
And
Oh, Sunil, I think you muted, but yes.
Confusion,
Confusion, absolutely.
headache, palpitation, insomnia,
Mhm.
difficult.
and causes
Yeah, absolutely. So everything that you're sharing, so nervousness, you can, a big indicator or a big thing sometimes that happens, especially is physical symptoms. So somebody said a headache. That can be very common with anxiety, right? So inside your head, it's a lot of worry, a lot of you can't stop thinking about something that happened in the past or worrying about something that happened in the future, right? So somebody might become very quiet, they might be stuck in their head, right? You might see sometimes for people that are anxious, someone mentioned insomnia. So a lot of difficulty sleeping. You feel like you can't turn your brain off, very stressed, very nervous. Sometimes you can be very shaky, very jittery. You might like tap your fingers around a lot, right? So all of these things can be signs of anxiety, right? And again, there's a normal amount of worry that happens, right? So it's normal for everyone sometimes to feel anxious. If you have an exam in the future, if you have a presentation that you're going to give, if you're meeting your, fiance's family or something, there may be lots of things that can make us feel very nervous, very worried. That's totally normal. Okay, but when it becomes anxiety, like an issue, like a mental health issue, is when, again, it lasts and lasts for a long time, where for a very long time, the things that we're worried about, maybe for other people, they wouldn't be so worried, right? Where it goes past that, the level of normal worry, and it becomes something, again, where you can't sleep at night because you're so worried about these things that might happen, right? So it can be very, very difficult to live with anxiety, to manage it. It can get in the way if you're not sleeping. It can make it hard at work. If you're shutting down, you're getting quiet. Another sign, you can also be very irritable with anxiety. So if you're so worried and so stressed out, and then people are asking you things, it can make you irritated. We can say, like, leave me alone, I'm worried, so it can cause problems in our relationships. It can cause a lot of problems for us to be anxious. Yeah. Okay. Any questions about anxiety? Sounds like that's something that a lot of us are familiar with. We know what it looks like, maybe. Yeah. Okay. The next category is trauma and stressor related disorders. So this is usually, if you've ever heard of PTSD. Have you ever heard of PTSD before? Was this something that anyone's heard of?
no.
No, okay. So, and yeah, I'm not sure, in the US, we diagnose what's called post-traumatic stress disorder. So this is when something happens, something very, very, very scary. Okay, something like an earthquake, like a massive earthquake, right? Or something that threatens your life happens, and we go through a terrible trauma or experience. And then after that experience, we can't stop thinking about it. We dream about it, or we worry about it all the time. We don't want to think about it. We don't want to talk about it. And then it changes the way that we feel all the time. We become very angry, or we become very, very sad all the time. And we can't stop going back to that event that happened. So every trauma, every big, huge, scary thing that happens, again, it's totally normal for that to be very scary for every person. So it's normal after the fact, say it's something life-threatening that happens. It's normal in the weeks after to think about it a lot, or to even dream about it, to not stop thinking about it. But over time, normally that kind of stops. Normally we go back to our norm. We start to feel better. We don't dream about it anymore. We can go on. We don't think about it all the time. But for certain situations, for some people, that doesn't go back to normal and it continues to go on and we can't stop. So that might be something called PTSD, which is basically just our brain trying to understand what happened and getting stuck in that moment, getting stuck in that trauma. And so it can make it, just like anxiety, it's similar to depression and anxiety. It can make it very hard for us to communicate, to talk to other people. We can be very angry, very irritable, very sad. We might sleep all the time. We might not be able to do the things we normally do. It can be very, very difficult to kind of manage everything when you're struggling with that, without getting help, without finding ways to deal with it. So that's what's called PTSD. It's a type of trauma related disorder. Okay. Adjustment disorders. So adjustment is when we go through a change in our lives. We move somewhere, we change our jobs, some big change happens, and kind of like the trauma, for everybody, it's normal to have some time where it's hard. It's hard when you move away from people you love, or it's hard to get a new job. But usually after a couple weeks, we get used to it, right? Like we settle in. For some people, that doesn't quite happen. We get very anxious because of the move. We get very depressed because we're far away from family. And so that might be because of that change that we're having a difficult time adjusting. So that tends to go away after usually maybe like 6 months, but sometimes we need help to get it to go away. So that would be what's called like an adjustment disorder. We're having a very difficult time adjusting to a big change, more than that normal kind of 1 to 2 weeks of adjusting. It lasts for months and months. Okay. Perinatal mood and anxiety disorders. So perinatal means pregnancy and after giving birth. So when a woman is pregnant, or when she gives birth for the year after she's had her baby, that's called the perinatal time. So perinatal mood and anxiety disorders are when someone develops depression or anxiety or other mental health disorders due to the pregnancy, or they go through childbirth and then they develop a lot of anxiety, or they become very, very depressed. So for some people, after they give birth, they can have a lot of really scary thoughts that are, can make them worried that they're going to want to hurt themselves or hurt other people. And so we would consider that to be something called postpartum depression or postpartum anxiety if they're very, very worried. And again, if it goes beyond, just like Prakriti shared, like when there's a normal level, I think for everybody that's pregnant, for everybody that has a baby, it's normal to feel a little more anxious. It's normal to feel a little bit worried, but this goes beyond. This is when you see that you're not sleeping. This is when you're crying all the time. You're very, very depressed. Or if it's getting really severe, you're having thoughts of suicide. That's when it's getting to its most extreme. So this is actually very common for a lot of people when they're pregnant, when they are getting ready to have a baby, and then after they have a baby, it can be really common to struggle with your mental health. And so it can be really helpful to know that that's a thing, that that's normal, so that if you or somebody else is experiencing it, it doesn't mean you're crazy. It just means you're going through a perinatal mental health issue and you can get help. Okay. And then the last one is behavioral disorders. So these might be things like, we call it ADHD. So ADHD is when you have a very difficult time focusing, paying attention to things, or your body can't relax, you're very hyper. That's called ADHD. There's also disorders like OCD. There's just different ones, behavioral disorders that are more about the behaviors that we do, right? So I know that that's a lot. That can be its own presentation, is just explaining more about each of these mental health issues. And there's lots more too. So this is not like it's all of the mental health issues that a person can have. Also, it can look different. All of these things can look different depending on the country that you live in or the culture that you have. So again, I'm a therapist in the US. So some of what I describe is based on the work that I do with people in the US, but it can look different in different countries, right? So sometimes in different countries, you might not hear somebody talking about the worries that they have in their mind or how anxious they feel. Instead, they might be telling you that they have headaches every day, or that they have stomach aches every day, or there might be different beliefs and things like that that you hear them talking about. So it can look very different depending on the country that you're in. So again, this is just from the US perspective, from my own training. So just to give you background information, but you can learn a lot more about it, definitely, if you were to go to school for it, become a psychologist yourself. So it's definitely not, it's not all inclusive. There's a lot more information to learn. For now, though, does anybody have any questions about anything that I went over on this slide?
No, ma'am.
Not for now. Okay. Thank you. Okay. Okay. So this slide, I have come up with some, oh, I drew on that, or no. So these are, I want to see if you can identify if any of these are myths or if any of these are facts. So can I get a volunteer to read just one by one? So if we can read the first one, and then I'd like to see what people think, is it a myth or a fact, and then read the next